This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and it's my job to help you, the construction business owner and leader, maximize profits and eliminate chaos. And I'm going to start this episode off telling you about a story. One morning, I drove into the shop of the company that I was managing, and I saw a big yellow banner wrapped around the building with letters that were 2 to 3 feet tall, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was reading. You see, the owner of the company had purchased a banner that he thought was going to be motivational. I'm not sure what he was thinking, but here's what it said. In big letters, picture this, a yellow banner on the side of a building on a busy road that said, "Proper planning prevents piss poor performance." Picture that. That's what we were looking at. And it went back to a statement. What was even crazier about it was that it was a statement that his drill instructor made back when he was in the Army. His drill instructor called it the 5 Ps. If you do the math, there are actually 6 Ps. But we're not going to talk about those 5 Ps or the 6 Ps, but we are going to talk about 3 Ps today. And those 3 Ps are preempting your punch list problems. Preempting punch list problems. So we're going to talk about the problems associated with punch list, the cost of punch list chaos, how you can solve it with 3 things. There's a 3-pronged approach you can take to preempt your punch list problems, and we're going to get into those details. But before we do that, I've got a couple of things that I want to share with you. Okay, there are 2 free guides that I want to get in your hands. First up is my cheat sheet with 32 productivity hacks to make your crews and your job sites more productive and profitable. If you're frustrated by lost time, wasted time, shop time, downtime, or stolen time, this is going to help you. Second up is the Optimize Your Overhead guide. After going through this short guide, you're going to have solid strategies for reducing your insurance costs, reducing your workers' comp cost, reducing your risk, saving money on back office activities, and even turning your accounts payable into a profit center. To download your free PDF guides, no strings attached, no email address required or anything like that, go to buildermasterclass.com. You'll also be able to get some details on the masterclass on maximizing bottom line profits that my good friend Spencer Paget and I put together, and hear from one of the builders who went through it. So go to buildermasterclass.com to get your free productivity hacks and your Optimize Your Overhead guide. Okay, let's talk about the preemptive strike. The advantage of a preemptive strike is that being the first to act decisively, you render your opponent unable to carry out aggressive intentions. So think about that. If you know you have a difficult customer, if you know you have a difficult architect, you know you have a difficult general contractor that you're dealing with, and you know they have aggressive intentions, your best bet is to make a preemptive strike. So let's talk about that. How can we preempt punch list problems? First of all, I'm going to poke the bear a little bit, and we'll talk about the problems. So I've seen punch lists done terribly. I've seen punch lists done pretty badly. I'm not sure that I've ever seen it done really, really well. Maybe once. But anybody that does punch lists well had a good plan. They preempted the chaos. So here are some of the most painful problems. Man, there's a lot of P's in this podcast. I just can't get away from it. There's the Perpetual punch list, where you have a never-ending punch list. You send subs in to fix things, and they cause damage while they're repairing something else, or your customer or the architect just keeps coming up with a new punch list. It just never ends. Or you get stuck fixing damage caused by your client or by their contractors. Maybe they send their furniture or FF&E installers in, or they move in before you do a punch list, and you end up fixing stuff that's not your responsibility. Another big one is you end up doing what I call unsolicited charity, because they're withholding payment. They are extorting you to do free work that should be a change order, But in order to get paid, you do this stuff. You fix stuff that's not your problem. One of the worst problems during the punch list phase would be when serious defects surface, things that are buried, like leaks, roof leaks, windows, storefront, these things that are multi-layers deep, and you have these serious defects that surface. Maybe there are performance issues. You find out that the HVAC system isn't performing, plumbing system isn't working, the domestic booster pump is not working, fire alarm is not working, the fire alarm monitoring system is not dialing out, the nurse call system is not working, issues with medical gas, whatever the case may be. And then one of the more sinister issues that I've seen a few times is there are design issues that are trying to masquerade as punch list issues. I'll give you an example. I did a utility replacement project a while back, and we installed, this was in a busy street, a busy highway actually, and we installed the concrete cap over the utility cut per the engineer's spec, and then it failed. The road was failing, and they tried to get me to come dig it up and replace it. And at first they said, well, just come down and dig it up, and then we'll figure out what it is. And this wasn't just a little patch. This was several thousand feet of road cut. And I told them, this is not a punch list issue. This is a design issue. We put it in per your spec, and it's not performing. This is not punch list. This is a design issue. So you have to watch out for design issues, design failures, or design deficiencies that are masquerading as punch list issues. And then there are problems with buried systems, systems that are above ceiling, issues in walls, structural systems, excessive deflection of structural steel, anything that's under a slab, something that's under finished flooring, problems with buried systems. And then you have some owner-created issues that you have to deal with. One example that I can think of, a few years ago, I was involved with a tenant improvement, or TI fit-out of a distribution center, and the client was really difficult. They were rushing to move in, and they moved their folks in while punch list work was still being done. So we had contractors in the building with the owners or the tenants' employees, and one day the plumbing backed up in the restroom, flooded the restroom, flooded carpet, caused some water damage, somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 or $6,000 worth of damage. And we pushed a camera down the line and found out that there was a wad of paper towels that had accumulated in one of the T's in the underground plumbing. And the owner, the client, said, it wasn't us, must have been the contractors. And the contractors weren't doing anything, and it was pretty clear that it was a client or a tenant-caused problem. But you know who ate the cost? The contractor did. Because if there are contractors in a building and something goes wrong, guess whose fault it is? And then the last problem is the owners withhold money for items that are really warranty issues. They're not punch list. They withhold money illegitimately for items that are punch list, that are not really punch list, they're actually warranty. So let's talk about the cost. There are a lot of profit bleeds associated with punch list chaos. And I've done a few podcast episodes talking about profit bleed. So if you're not sure about what that is, I'm not going to go into it. But I'll talk about a few that are related to punch list chaos. Number one is rework. When you have to go in and tear out work, invest money in materials, labor, equipment, subcontractors, overhead, direct costs to tear out and rebuild something. There's something I already touched on, which is unsolicited charity. Doing work that really should be a change order, but you're doing it for free for whatever reason. Either to make the client happy, because they're extorting you, whatever the case may be. Unsolicited charity often rears its ugly head during the punch list phase. And there are schedule overruns. You might be getting hammered with liquidated damages because your client's saying, it's not really substantially complete. Yeah, maybe you're doing a punch list, but there are these issues, and we're going to hit you with liquidated damages. There are some clients out there who look at liquidated damages as a cost-saving strategy. Remember how I said the definition of a preemptive strike, or the advantage of a preemptive strike, is to render your opponent unable to carry out aggressive intentions. There are clients out there who have aggressive intentions, and they're looking for ways to save money by hitting you with liquidated damages. It's unfortunate, but true. In addition to liquidated damages, there are the additional general conditions or overhead costs that you have associated with supervising the work. And then there's the opportunity cost. If you're in this extended punch list process, then you're basically handcuffed to that project, when you could and should be doing the next project, the next profitable project. If your people are stuck doing non-revenue producing work, then every day, every hour you're handcuffed to that project is an hour you're not making money on the next project, which is causing other ripple effects with those clients, and it's ugly. You also have the cost that's hard to put a number on when it comes to strained relationships with your customers. I've seen projects that went fantastic for the first 97%, and then they just screwed the pooch on the punch list phase, and it ruined the relationship, and they lost opportunities on future projects. You're also straining relationships with trade partners, and you're also straining relationships with your team. Nobody likes to do work twice. Everybody that I've ever worked with that's a good team member wants to be productive. They don't want to go back in and get stuck to a project. They want to win, and nobody wins when you're doing extended punch list projects. And then in extreme cases, one of the costs of punch list chaos is the loss of the will to live, the loss of the will to continue in the business. And you think, screw this. Why am I doing this? There has to be a better way. So how do we solve it? This is obviously a painful problem. It's obviously very costly, has lots of ripple effects that we've just scratched the surface on. So how do we solve it? Well, as I mentioned, there's a three-prong approach that I've seen that works really well. And this comes from a little over 20 years of experience of dealing with chaos and dealing with difficult clients with aggressive intentions. And here are the three prongs. The first prong is your agreements. The second prong is systems. The third prong is setting expectations. So agreements, systems, expectations. Let's talk with your agreement. One of the root causes of punch list chaos comes down to this one little thing, and it is the definition of substantial completion. This is where the knowledge gap shows up. And if you're not familiar with what I call the knowledge gap, this is where you are defining substantial completion as one thing, and your client is defining it as something else. They think substantial completion means complete, final complete, or they think something different than you do. And I've seen a lot of contracts, and I have yet to see one that does a good job of defining clearly what substantial completion means. So, number one, in your agreements, clearly define substantial completion. So it could mean if you're doing building construction, and I'll talk about commercial applications. This probably applies to residential and a lot of other things as well. But a definition of substantially complete could include a temporary certificate of occupancy, which legally is what is required for them to occupy the building. And that's going to require all final inspections to be complete. You could tie it to a term that works pretty well, which is beneficial occupancy, which is the use of a building or a facility by the owner for its intended purpose. It means that it's functionally complete. This term beneficial occupancy has some precedence out there. But the key is to really have a definition. How are you going to define substantially complete? And then the other thing to discuss and cover in your agreement is outline what happens at substantial completion when it comes to some of the costs that you might be carrying, like utilities. Who's responsible for security of the building? Who is responsible for maintenance, grass cutting, trash removal, etc.? At substantial completion, a lot of things happen, and that's when things are turned over to the client. At some point, things have to be handed off from contractor to client, and it's important to outline what's going to happen at substantial completion. The other thing to do in the agreement is to outline your punch list process in your agreement. So you want to define substantial completion. Number 2 is to outline your punch list process in your agreement. We're going to get to that in just a few minutes. And then the third thing in your agreements is to set up agreements with your trade partners such that there's some retainage that is withheld from the final payment until all punch list work is complete. If you want your trade partners to perform, then it's best to withhold money. That's just the reality. It would be great if everybody would do what they have to do, regardless of the money involved, but it's best to have some leverage. And if you're a general contractor, it's best to withhold more than the value of the punch list work so that if your trade partner doesn't show up, you can go get somebody else to do it and not have to eat that cost. All right, so 3 things in your agreements: define substantial completion, outline your punch list process, and then set up your agreements with your trade partners so you withhold retainage and just make sure all of that risk flows from the owner to you, to your trade partners accordingly. All right, that's agreements. Now let's talk about systems. What do you do during construction to reduce or preempt your punch list? Let's talk about systems. The first thing is to shift your mindset away from doing things as late as you can get by with to doing them as early as possible. So do things as based on to use a scheduling lingo, an early start instead of a late finish. Okay, push things up as early as possible. So buy out your subcontracts early. Get all submittals and selections and shop drawings done early. Don't wait until the last minute to get selections. That's a recipe for punch list problems. If you're dealing with clients that have a lot of selections that need to be made, push all of those decisions, color selections, countertop selections, siding selections, whatever it is, all finishes. Don't wait until as late as possible. Push all of those decisions by the client to the front of your schedule, because the root cause of a lot of punch list problems is rushing to get materials in, rushing to get decisions made, and just trust me on that. Push all of those decisions and buyout and submittals and selections up to the front. If you're wondering what's buyout, well, the contract buyout phase, if you're in commercial construction, that's a pretty familiar term. But if you're not in commercial construction, then the buyout phase is after you've been awarded the contract and then you buy out the project. You break up your contract into a bunch of little pieces and buy it out with your trade partners in the form of master subcontract agreement, trade partner handbook, and then purchase orders. That assigns your risk to your trade partners. And if you want a deep dive on that, then you should check out the masterclass that Spencer Paget and I did. There's one module in that masterclass that is basically a masterclass in and of itself. There are 6 modules total, but there's one on streamlining trade partner operations. And you can find out more about that and get on the wait list over at buildermasterclass.com. So the other system that you want to put in place during construction is to have a solid quality control program and inspect things as early as possible instead of at the end. A lot of people think cram it in, get it done as fast as you can, and then we'll fix it during punch list. That is what you call stupid, okay? Especially if you're stacking trades on top of each other and you're covering things up. You do not want to try to fix it at the punch list phase. And in some cases, you don't even want to wait until a trade is done to check their work. What I like to do, if you have something that's a little tricky or technical, would be to inspect it as soon as they get started. Let them get a little bit of the work done and inspect that work. So we'll talk about a QC program in just a minute, but one other thing to do that will help you avoid a lot of punch list, preempt your punch list problems, are mock-ups. Mock-ups. I've had this conversation with a lot of people. I've done mock-ups of entire building exteriors, showing all of the EIFS details, window flashing, technical, gingerbread bullshit, colors, whatever the case may be, to get the client to review it and say, yeah, that's the right finish, that's the right color we like, that is the level of detail that we're happy with. I was involved in a 250 unit senior living community project where I was the owner's rep, and we didn't wait until we had built 250 units. As early as possible, we finished out one unit completely. Completely finished, carpet, flooring, finished paint, everything, and we used that as a mock-up. We took clients and marketing and all the stakeholders through it and said, here it is, look at the textured ceiling, look at the paint, look at the trim, look at how everything works. Is this good? I've heard mock-ups with specialty concrete finishes, mock-up for paint, flashing details, but mock-ups. Think mock-up. Before you build something, create a mock-up. Make sure everybody's good with that. That's going to save you a lot of problems in the punch list. One of the big benefits of a mock-up is to keep that mock-up around so that if somebody says, I don't really like that detail during the punch list phase, you can go point back to the mock-up and say, this is what we agreed to, right? So show me how this is different. Mock-ups are going to save you a lot of trouble. Let's talk about quality control. All right, so come up with a quality control program. This is pretty simple. Don't check out thinking this is overwhelming. This is very, very simple. So first of all would be to do an 80-20 analysis. If you're not familiar with that, that's the Pareto principle that says, in this case, 20% or 80% of your problems are going to come from 20% of the parts of the work. Okay? Think about that. Think about your punch list. 80% of those punch list items are probably related to 20% of your trades. So identify those high-risk phases and then develop a quality control checklist for each phase. Think about how are we going to check this out? And then document it. Come up with a list of things you want to check off at inspections, and then just carry out those inspections every time. So a few examples for a commercial building would be a footer inspection. You know what? If you have unsuitable materials under your foundation, then it doesn't matter how good everything else is, you're going to have problems. So footer inspection. Bring a third-party materials testing or a geotech firm out and make sure that they're checking everything out. Before slabs are poured, do a pre-pour inspection. And in some cases, when I've had complicated commercial buildings or industrial floors, we would have a pre-pour conference. Bring all of the trade partners, all of the suppliers together, talk about coordination details, and get everybody on the same page. And in a lot of cases, it makes sense to bring in an expert, to bring in a third party to review mix designs, review control joint details, and be there to do inspections as well. Next would be framing inspection. After rough-in and before insulation or drywall goes up, inspect it, have your checklist of things you're looking for, take pictures, document. That's a great time. Above ceiling inspections as well. If you're doing a commercial project, make sure you're inspecting everything certainly before ceiling tile goes up, but maybe even before ceiling grid goes up. And then building envelope. Do a building envelope checklist, house wrap, building wrap, water membrane, storefront installation, flashing details, windows, siding, roofing. I'll tell you about an example of an issue that I caught. This was somewhere in the neighborhood of a $60 million office building, and I was reviewing a roofing shop drawing. This was in the Cincinnati, Ohio area, and I noticed that the roofing shop drawing showed one layer of polyiso insulation under a TPO roof membrane. And if you do roofing or if you do commercial buildings in the Midwest, you know that is a recipe for disaster, because one layer of polyiso insulation under a membrane roof allows warm, moist air from inside to go up and hit the cold membrane, and the result is you have rain inside your building. So that would have been a punch list item, and it would have been an incredibly expensive item to fix. There would have been litigation, who knows what else. But that, you talk about a high-risk activity. So this QC program also includes taking the time to look at your submittals and shop drawings on high-risk portions of the building. Think about long-term risk, right? So you can do these checklists with paper. There are checklist apps. You can use a tool like Company Cam to take pictures and keep track of all those pictures. Tools like CoConstruct also allow you to keep all of that information in one place. And remember, just because you take a picture of something doesn't really mean anything. You need to be able to tie that picture to a room and be able to find it, right? Sort of like if a library book is not in the right place in the library, it's gone. It's useless. So just because you took pictures and they're somewhere, that's not going to help you when you have a problem. And here's an interesting strategy that my team developed on that 250 unit retirement community. It's related to the final coat of paint. So looking at the punch list on previous projects, think about where most of the problems are. A lot of the problems are with paint touch-ups, dings, nicks in the walls, nicks on doors, door frames, etc. And so we said, all right, let's think about a different way to do this. Very early on in the project, the team decided, here's what we're going to do. We're going to buy 3 coats of paint for this entire building. This was a $70 million construction contract, 250 units. So we're going to prime all the walls. We're going to put 1 finish coat of paint on the walls, and then we're going to install everything else. We'll do the punch list inspection. Then we'll complete all the punch list repairs, make sure everybody's good with that, and then have the painter come in and do the last coat of paint after everybody's done. And it was brilliant. It worked brilliantly. So just keep in mind, if you can get everybody on board with the idea that we're not going to do a punch list inspection on the final coat of paint, that's going to give you a much better finished project. So a couple of other things as part of your system would be to document all of your communication. Get a system like CoConstruct. If you want details on CoConstruct, if you're a builder, remodeler, general contractor, and you want a system you can run your entire business on and run all of your projects on, then go to constructionleadingedge.com/CoConstruct, C-O-Construct. And you can have 100% of your customer communication happen inside there. Or you can use a system like FieldChat, where you can go to fieldchat.com/edge. And that's going to give you a searchable, organized record of all of your text messages. So if you communicate with your trade partners and your clients using text, then use FieldChat. It'll help you fight off those aggressive intentions or maybe even just selective memory loss. But maybe you're not doing commercial construction, maybe you're doing something else. So here's my advice for you, would be to look for the areas where you have the most chaos at the end of the projects. Maybe you're a concrete contractor, maybe you're an electrician, maybe you're a flooring subcontractor, whatever the case may be. Identify the few things that show up the most. What are the most chronic areas of chaos that you're having? And then use the 5 whys method to get to the root cause. If you're not familiar with the 5 whys method, it's identify the symptom or the problem, and then ask why. Why is this happening? And then why is this happening? And why is this happening? You keep asking why. You'll come up with reason number 1, and then ask, well, why is reason number 1 happening? You'll come up with reason number 2. Well, why is reason number 2 happening? And you keep doing that until you get to the root cause, and that's where you put a system in place. So get to the root cause, take the time, put a system in place that addresses the root cause, and your symptoms, your chaos will magically disappear. It's great stuff. All right, now let's talk about how to set expectations. Okay, this is one of the keys. These three things they're sort of like a three-legged stool, right? You can have the agreement in place, you can have systems in place, but if you don't set the expectations properly, if you don't anchor everybody on the team to these expectations at the right time, then nothing else really works. So here's what I recommend, okay? About 30 to 60 days before substantial completion, remind the customer of your closeout and punch list process. Remind them of the definition of substantially complete. Remember, we set that expectation, we set that definition in the agreement. 30 to 60 days out, we're going to say, all right, this is what substantially complete is. Here's our process. We're not asking if you're okay with it. We're telling you this is how it is. This is the deal we all signed up for. And you're setting that expectation. Then you set the expectation that there will be one final official punch list inspection on a scheduled date, and that anybody who's interested in participating should attend. You do not want to allow multiple people to do their own punch lists. You don't want to have multiple rounds of punch lists going over the same area, doing multiple punch lists. That is a recipe for disaster. So a couple of weeks in advance, you set the expectation. This is the official punch list inspection. If you want to get in on it, then you should attend or send a representative for that inspection. Then the contractor notifies the team when the project is substantially complete. Notify the team in writing. It's substantially complete. Then the team meets for the official punch list inspection. And one caveat, do not do your punch list inspection too early. If it's not done, don't do your punch list inspection. It reminds me, I was doing an emergency department addition at a hospital, and that required a state building inspector to come. And he was a little tough to schedule, so honestly, I had him come about a week earlier. We weren't quite ready. And he came to my job site trailer, said, hey, I'm the inspector. Let's go take a look. We walked into the building. It was sort of a racetrack configuration. There was a significant amount of work still going on, punch list work getting done. We walked around the racetrack, walked back to the door. We walked outside. He looked at me and said, call me when you're done. And I sort of sheepishly said, okay, you're right. But don't do punch list inspections. Don't waste people's time if you're not really done. It doesn't do anybody any good. You're just going to piss everybody off. All right, so when you're done, the team meets for the official punch list inspection. This is an event. Tease them, lure them with donuts, coffee, whatever you have to do, but you want to get people there. It's in your best interest to get all interested parties there. If it's a large project, then split it up. Split it up into phases. If it's a multiple floor building, break it up into floors. We're going to punch the fourth floor, the third floor. If it's a very large single floor building, punch the site and the exterior, and then punch the interior, but break it up into phases. Then all interested parties from the client side should attend. This would be the general contractor is going to be there, client, architect, or an owner's rep. No subs, no suppliers. Don't have too many people from the general contracting team there. The contractor documents all issues noted during the punch list. There are plenty of tools out there for that. I'm sure if you have Procore or CoConstruct or PlanGrid, or there's all sorts of other punch list tools that will allow you to do that. But one person or maybe multiple people on the contractor's team should be tracking these things and creating the official punch list. We're not arguing about things. We're just noting comments, doing the inspection. Then the contractor goes back and prepares the official punch list with an estimated value for each punch list item, okay? Then, once that is prepared, the contractor prepares some sort of certificate of substantial completion and attaches the punch list and then sends it to the architect and or the owner, and then and provides a short, like 2 to 3 deadline for any comments or additions to the punch list. And if you're wondering, where can I find a good certificate of substantial completion? Then go to Google and look up the AIA G704. AIA G704. That's a good certificate of substantial completion that's recognized by the AIA. Works great for commercial, and if you're doing residential or something else, download it. It's like a one-page document. You can just ethically plagiarize some of the comments and the text that's on there. Now, you may be wondering, what if they bring up stuff on this punch list that's not really a punch list item? Well, any items that are not truly punch list items are flagged. You're going to create a separate list. We heard what you said. This is what you asked for. And you keep a separate list of those things. You can call them I've called them post-startup items, PSU list, post-startup or post-move-in, or a potential change order log. And you track those items and say, this is not in our contract. And then you present those to them and agree or disagree and you negotiate on what should be in, what should be out, and what they want to price on. Don't go price stuff and waste everybody's time just because they pointed it out during a punch list inspection. Wait to make sure they understand, oh, we're going to have to pay for this before you spend any time on that. Then the owner signs off on the certificate of substantial completion, which has the punch list items on there. They send it back. They thereby indicate their approval. Yes, the building is substantially complete, or the project is substantially complete. Yes, we agree with the punch list. Boom, you have just memorialized substantial completion. You've memorialized the punch list that everybody agrees to. And this puts a nice box around the punch list and has set the expectation that, hey, we can't add anything else to it. Anything else that comes up moving forward is going to be a warranty item, or it's going to be a post-startup item that we can look at after you move in, but we've got to get this thing done. Then you and your team go about fixing all of the punch list items. Then you notify the owner when all items are done, the project is finally complete. So notice that we put a value on each of those punch list items, and this is what you want to make sure and hold back in retainage for your trade partners, if you have trade partners. Also, you're going to use this to come up with your final pay application to the owner. If you have whatever the value of your contract is, you're going to you're going to submit a pay application that has everything that's left to be paid minus the value of what's on the punch list. And if you want to be a little conservative, you can withhold 150% of the value of what's left to be done on that punch list. And if you do those things, if you set your agreements up right and you have systems in place, and then you set the expectations, you will dramatically reduce the chaos associated with the punch list process. All right, there you go. If you have questions about that, let me know. If you want to know how to connect with me, you can go to constructionleadingedge.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Todd DeWalt, DAWALT. I don't know that there's a lot of Todd DeWalts out there, but you should be able to find me there. And then make sure and get your hands on those 2 free guides, productivity hacks to make your job sites more productive and profitable. If you are self-performing work with your own hourly employees, the tips you're going to get out of that guide could save you, I guarantee they'll save you thousands of dollars, could be tens of thousands of dollars every year. These are tips that I developed as I grew a company from 15 employees up to 50 employees. And then the other guide that's available is how to optimize your overhead. And you can get all of that stuff over at buildermasterclass.com. My name is Todd DeWalt from constructionleadingedge.com. Thanks for listening. Hopefully this helps you. Let me know, and I will see you next time.